Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people of this beautiful planet. It's another episode of League Online. My name is Eric Flying Solo. On today's epi, as we are previewing, getting hyped for the LEC Summer Split, the second of the four major regions to kick things off for summer, just a mere few days away. So we're doing a little power rankings 10-1 because especially and pretty much only the bottom half of the LEC, there were actually quite a few roster changes, some rookies coming in for the first time in the LEC. The top half remained pretty stable in terms of roster changes, which is usually how things go. The teams that don't do well need to make some moves, and moves they did make. As we start at that bottom half with a team that actually didn't make any moves, and that's kind of why they're in that 10 spot, and that is Rogue. They haven't finished 10th yet in an LEC split in 2024, but they got back-to-back 9th place finishes, even though they forced a tiebreaker with SK to maybe make it into that top 8 next round, but ultimately not able to get it done. This is still a lot of the core, at least Larson and Comp, who were vying for titles in the LEC, and obviously, the fall-off has been pretty substantial. It's been the same issues, it feels like, for 2 years now, basically, for this Rogue roster, where they're not willing to make plays. They don't seem to have a player that's aggressive or confident enough to look actively for plays. They're just waiting for teams to make mistakes. Teams don't really make enough mistakes for Rogue to come away with a win. It feels like we've been harping on the exact same thing, split in and split out, for this Rogue roster, and even since Finn came into the lineup, things didn't really change, so I don't see why they will change for this summer split, especially when you see some of these other more bottom table teams making what seem to be positive changes on the roster. That's an easy lock-in to put Rogue in that number 10 spot when you immediately jump up to SK Gaming, that team who beat them in the tiebreaker for playoffs. And in the playoff run, they were completely underwhelming, and even qualifying that tiebreaker against Rogue, there were lots of memes about it being irrelevant and 4 awards. And yes, irrelevant is far and away the brightest shining star on this roster, and they become difficult to grade because we've got a new bot lane coming in. That's the change in the offseason. Rahel from D+ Academy, who honestly you should be pretty hyped about, because number one, we've seen Noah and Ice both come in from the Korean scene and immediately be one of the two best almost AD carries in the LEC, and I honestly thought Rahel might be getting starting time from aiming on D+ Kia. Obviously did not end up coming true, but he's a rookie who's absolutely shown some promise and been one of the premier guys in the LCK Challenger squad. And then Luan coming over from Nongshim Academy, used to just be HH, but 2 Challenger level 80 bot laners coming over from the LCK. Obviously, they haven't played together before. Yes, they're going to speak the same language, so communication won't be an issue in the bot lane, but this feels very heavily inspired from the bot lane out of Fnatic, basically going the exact same route, but difficult to grade how they're going to fit in. And honestly, Niski and Isma were kind of the suspect spots when you're looking at the spring split. At Exakick absolutely was as well, especially in the playoff push for them. But this change doesn't make me feel a ton better about SK Gaming looking towards that summer split. It potentially could be better, potentially could be a playoff team. That's not out of the question, especially when it's only 1 spot above to finish 8th to get to that playoff round. But I don't see SK going higher than that 7-8 area with this core roster, and I'm worried Mr. Irrelevant is going to become very relevant in the offseason and be saying bye-bye to SK as some of these other bigger organizations reach out to the potentially star top laner within the LEC. 8th spot, just ahead of SK, is Giant X, who, top side of the map, Odo, God bless him, one of the most likable players in the LEC. You're almost always rooting for him, but it felt like most of 2024 he was behind the curve when it came to the rest of the top players. in the LEC. So the Antonio coming in looks like an upgrade on paper. This is a guy who I remember hearing his name for a long time, and he's been in that challenger scene in Europe the better part of half a decade, since 2019, most of them with that same squad, that same organization in EU Masters, whatever, EMA, whatever the challenger scene has changed around the name in Europe. But excited for him to debut in the LEC. 25 years old. So yes, he's a rookie, but he's got lots of experience playing with many different types of players. So I feel like he's going to develop even quicker than your traditional rookie, just because he has so many more games under his belt than an 18-year-old is going to have debuting on the big stage. And then Juan is a name we should all be familiar with. He played with the Antonio last split on Giant X's Challenger squad, and this is obviously the backup for Piosic during that World Championship run for DRX. He even was one of the main reasons that DRX even qualified for that World Championship. Obviously, we're not talking about him as a traditional World Champion level player, like a guy coming over, fresh off of T1 or an actual starter, but I still think these are upgrades for Giant X. I still think Jackie's has the potential to be one of the better mid laners in the LEC, so seeing his continued growth alongside this new top side, and I'm feeling better about GX than I did the first couple of splits. Obviously, it was a year ago in the summer finals that they made that incredible run all the way to the finals. I'm not saying that's going to be the case here, but I think they're going to be looking much better than they are in spring, assuming we get a bit of a level up from both Patrick and Ignar in the bot lane, who are both returning to the squad. And Patrick, how long has he been on Giant X/Excel? 4 years now, it feels like, and it almost seems like it's a coin flip between splits, where you're either talking about him as one of the premier carries in the LEC, or he's underwhelming and just kind of there in the bot lane. I think a lot of that is going to be dependent on what this meta is. If we're getting more hyper carry type 80 carries in the bottom lane, that's when we know Patrick thrives. But on the other side, Ignar's more of an engaged support player. So I never really thought this pairing made sense in terms of playstyle, because I always felt Patrick was better with a support kind of going hand in hand with him in these team fights, peeling for him as the priority, whereas Ignar has always been at his best in his career when he's playing these engaged type champions. So we'll see if the development of that bot lane continues alongside Mr. Rookie Jackie's, but still expecting an improvement upwards for GX compared to what we were getting out of them in previous splits. Tricky one to grade is Team Heretics, not because there's new stuff coming in. It's the same guys coming back. Perks is still out. Zwiru is still in the mid lane. Flackett and Trimby and the OGs, Wonder and Yankos. And we've seen flashes from this squad, not that look like they could be even a world's level team in the LEC, but they could compete with some of the better teams in Europe. And the problem is those flashes are few and far between. This is a team that very much plays to the level of their competition. So if they're playing Rogue, if they're playing SK, they're going to play at the same level, and you got a nasty European fiesta going on. But they're matching up against Fnatic in playoffs, and they're winning games. They're playing competitive against a team that would end up going all the way to the finals. So it's a very difficult squad to grade. So much of it runs through what level Yankos is at, and it still feels like the second straight year of Yankos being on the Team Heretics roster. So much pressure is on his shoulders. If he's not playing at a top 3 jungler in Europe level, then this team is going absolutely nowhere fast. So needs some step up from the rest of the squad. We haven't seen any vintage Wonder performances, and Flackett, I think, was great in winter, not as good in spring. So we've seen, it just feels like the explosiveness and the ceiling for this team is a lot lower than some of these teams with even younger players. One of those squads that I think's got a little bit more potential heading into this year. And I know people are probably going to be scoffing and laughing at K-Corp being as high as number 6, because this is a team that has back-to-back last place, 10th place finishes with roster changes between every single split. I didn't double check this, but I'm pretty sure this is the only team that has made a roster change after every single split so far in 2024. But I feel better about this one. I'm still scratching my head a little bit that Targamas is on the roster. It feels like he has been one of the, if not the biggest issue on this roster throughout the last 3 splits, but they need somebody still speaking French on the roster. So Targamas and Upset are the, only returning members from last year. We're still waiting for Kalist, I assume in 2025 is going to be the starter, but big change is Vladdy coming in to start in the mid lane, fresh off an LFL title, obviously with the EU Masters. He's only 18 years old, but one of the more hyped up rookie mid laners coming out of the challenger scene in Europe. So very excited to see him. Obviously, Saken, you did not get that Faker of EU Masters level. Outside of the Azir, I feel like he was underwhelming on most picks. So the latest and greatest rookie mid laner, feels like every single split, doesn't matter the year, every single split, there's a new rookie mid laner that comes in with some high potential in EU, and Vladdy is the latest one to be that for K-Corp. Closer, I was least excited about in terms of roster changes for K-Corp. I'm not so sure his return to kind of the EU scene. We'll see what level he's at, because it wasn't great in his closing out tenure with 100 Thieves. If he's playing at that level, I'm a little bit concerned. But I'm much more excited about Vladdy, and equally as excited about Kana. Coming in, yet another Korean import heading over to EU. Feels like this is the most Korean imports we've had in a long time in the European scene, at least. LCS, yes, of course. That's the tale as old as time, but usually not this many in EU. I know Kana, people maybe weren't feeling, they felt so up and down about him since he left T1, but there's no doubt in my mind, this guy still has the talent and the skills to come over to a region like the LEC and immediately be vying for that best top in the league. Who the guys he's got to jump over, you're talking about Irrelevant, Broken Blade, Photon. Absolutely, Kana could be at the level to do that, and he's the main reason I'm hesitantly excited about this K-Corp roster. Surely these changes are enough to make sure that this is not a bottom feeder team again. 6th seems like maybe on the higher end or a glass half full kind of view for this K-Corp roster, but that's exactly where we are hanging out. Team Vitality, only a single change. I honestly didn't think they'd be making any changes because they had such a damn good playoff run. They were playing at such a high level. You thought this team maybe could even go all the way to finals. But now it's Douglas out at only 18 years old. Truly hope this guy finds another LEC spot because he showed great moments on Vitality. But Linkus coming in, one of them, not just hyped up junglers coming from the challenger scene, one of the most hyped up players coming in. People have been waiting for him to make his LEC debut. Apparently, he's had opportunities in the past, both XL and Rogue reaching out, seeing if he wanted to start. And my man, as a rookie, coming in saying, no, I don't want to play for those bottom tier teams. I'm going to wait for a better opportunity. Obviously feels like Vitality is that opportunity. He's going to be surrounded by veterans who will be able to help groom him into having a fantastic rookie split. If he hits the ground running, sure, you feel like maybe his ceiling will be higher than Douglas, but he seemed to fit in pretty well with Vitality. This is a squad that I feel like can legit vie for top 3 potential and be a world's caliber squad. And Linkus coming in maybe takes them even a little bit higher in terms of potential to see what this rookie can do. Because again, Douglas was pretty good for the majority of 2024, so they're obviously feeling very high. I know Coach Mack has talked about they wanted Linkus like before the year even started to come onto the squad, so this is a prospect they've been eyeing for a long time, so not surprising that he does end up here on Vitality. And speaking of Mac, his former squad, Mad Lions Koi, they lost to Vitality in that head-to-head playoffs, but I feel like Mad Lions Koi was not at the level that we've seen out of them previous times in the split, and I still feel like as we continue to get these rookies growing and adjusting to playing on the big stage, as the meta continues to develop and they have to adapt, this is a team that can represent EU at Worlds. Combine that with what we're seeing early in the LPL season, and it's a whole lot more carry junglers coming into the meta, and nobody is more excited about that than Mr. Elyoya, even though we love to see him popping off on an Ivern. Seeing Nidalee, Lilia, Viego, picks like this where Elyoya can take over games. We know he's the vocal member of this squad, the main leader, and when he is popping off, getting kills, getting a lot of gold, that is when MDK is at their best. And when we've seen them at their best, they're a team that can go toe-to-toe with pretty much anybody in the LEC right now. So again, they lost the head-to-head to Vitality, but as a hard reset heading into summer, I still feel a little bit higher about them than Vitality, especially when you're now bringing in a new rookie jungler who just played in EU Masters, probably doesn't have too much scrim time under his belt with the new squad, so there's going to be absolutely an adjustment period for him and Team Vitality, whereas Mad Lions, it's the same core 5 coming back, the same core 5 that have been here for every single split so far, so the synergy will only continue to develop for this Spanish organization. Into the top 3 now, which are probably the most cut and dry of all the squads. I mean, case in point, what you saw in last year's playoffs. We start with Team BDS, who had the does any team have more painful reverse sweeps happen to them than BDS over the last couple of years? But nonetheless, they showed they can compete against Fnatic. It's just BDS, or G2 is their kryptonite, and spoilers, G2 is the kryptonite for all of Europe, so they're no different there. But we saw the new playstyle of BDS where they were not playing around Adam so much. You got Ice playing at a legit MVP level at times. Nuke continues to shut up all these haters saying he's overrated and gets carried by his team, because he is a focal point, especially with some of these pocket picks like a Cassiopeia that we've seen him take over so many games. And even though they're not playing through Adam as much, this dude still played 10 different champions in 14 playoff games. You had, still the pocket picks like a Darius and an Olaf, but crazier other stuff. Yasuo, Zac, off meta. He's learning everything. So even though they're not playing through him, Adam is still absolutely one of the strongest points of this BDS roster. They should be favorites to be one of the world's teams heading into 2024 for Europe. Still not enough because they lost that reverse sweep at the hands of Fnatic. And even though Fnatic bowed out with a whimper from the midseason invitational, I think it was still pretty clear throughout the majority of the spring split that they had the highest ceiling of any team not named G2 Esports, and we were feeling so hyped up. We had Noah and Jun as the best bot lane in EU ahead of Hansama and Mickey heading into MSI, and it felt like they never did really reach that potential that we were expecting to see out of them. We got a few coin flip humanoid games that definitely ended up on tails, which we saw so few of in the playoff run. Maybe 1 or 2 against BDS, but for the most part, he was playing at such a high level, and clearly that main rival to Caps, and truthfully has been for the last couple of years, but not the same power level at MSI for Fnatic that we saw out of EU. But now that they're back, got a little bit of home cooking back in the Berlin studio, fully expect Fnatic to be that main contender against G2. That's not to say squads like BDS, Mad Lions, Vitality, they can absolutely reach the level of Fnatic and maybe even topple over them. It's not like they're leaps and bounds of full multiple tiers ahead of these other contending squads in the LEC. I think that entire top 5 is a little closer than I think people are expecting heading into this split. So Fnatic far from untouchable in that number 2 spot as all of these other contending teams come up. But again, no roster moves for Fnatic, BDS, or MDK, and no roster changes also for G2 Esports. In fact, we saw the announcement that Broken Blade is signing yet another contract with them, and makes sense. The top father, glad he's found such a stable home over at G2. And listen, the thing with G2, I see people talking about this going, okay, they're way too good for EU, but not good enough internationally, so they can't even upgrade any of their players because a lot of them are close to best in their role. At most, you're getting a side grade. But who's saying G2 can't compete internationally when they just took T1 to a 5-game competitive set? They were a couple team fights away from winning that. I know they lost 3-0 in the follow-up, but I digress. One series competitive enough. Combine that with a 3-0 thrashing of top Esports, who immediately have returned to the LPL and started beating up on people again. And I don't know where you're getting your facts that they can't compete internationally, because this G2 squad has been doing just that, and they've been the only members of the LEC to really be doing that as of late. So, of course, G2 comes in number one. They've won both splits already, going for the coveted three-peat, which has never happened because it's only the second year that they've had 3 series or 3 splits happen at once in the LEC. So obviously that's a kind of skewed stat, but they're going to be huge favorites throughout. Caps continues to play some of the best level individually that he's had in his whole career, and this is a multi-time MVP dude who's gone against some of the very best in the world. He did it just again at MSI. Outside of Chovy and Knight, Caps was the best performing mid laner at the entire event, in an event that has Faker, that has some other iconic mid laners, guys like Maple, guys like Jensen. LOL, didn't even make the main stage. Anyways, Caps was incredible at MSI. Hansama and Mickey leveled up to a better level at MSI as opposed to Noah and Jun, who we expected to be better. Hansama and Mickey were a little bit better than I was expecting at MSI. So if they bring that sauce back to EU, G2 are again going to be huge favorites time and time again. It doesn't matter the first couple of rounds. G2, they're going to, for fun, their way into playoffs, maybe not be the top seed, maybe not be a top 3 seed because they play so few games in this round robin, but it doesn't matter. As soon as best of fives roll around, I guarantee you all 9 other teams, the number 1 team they want to avoid in playoffs is going to be G2, just like it is every single other split. I just hope some of these other squads can pull up their big boy pants and raise to the level to really challenge G2 in the most important split of the year. But that is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric, and thank you all you beautiful people for joining us as always, and we'll catch you on that flippity flip.